The small town of Pinecrest in New England was bathed in early summer sunlight. Inside the old wooden library building, Evelyn Lawrence was surrounded by children, reading them a picture book. Her gentle voice echoed through the room, drawing the children into the world of the story. And so, the princess learned what true courage really means. As Evelyn closed the book, applause erupted from the children. She stood up with a smile and began preparing for the next reading session. This job at the library was her sanctuary, especially since she had started a new life with her 15-year-old daughter Hannah after a bitter divorce 2 years ago. "That was wonderful, Evelyn," her colleague Martha commented. "The children absolutely adore your storytelling." Evelyn smiled, but at that moment, her cell phone vibrated in her pocket. Her ex-husband Jeffrey Lawrence's name appeared on the screen. She hesitated for a moment, took a deep breath, and answered. "Jeffrey, what is it?" She tried to keep her voice steady. "Evelyn, I've just sent formal papers through my lawyer." Jeffrey's voice was cold and businesslike. "I'm filing for full custody of Hannah. I've determined that your emotional instability is having a negative impact on our daughter's development." Evelyn felt her heart nearly stop. But sensing Martha's concerned gaze, she made a tremendous effort to maintain her composure. She wanted to avoid being labeled as too emotional again. "I understand. I'll consult with my lawyer," she replied briefly and ended the call. "Is everything all right?" Martha asked. Evelyn tried to smile, but her facial muscles wouldn't cooperate. "My ex-husband is filing for custody of Hannah." Martha's face registered surprise. "Goodness. Jeffrey Lawrence. The man known as the town's perfect gentleman." Evelyn gave a bitter smile. In the eyes of the townspeople, Jeffrey was a successful real estate company owner and a calm, rational gentleman. Meanwhile, Evelyn, who had let her emotions explode during the divorce, had gained a reputation for being unstable and emotional. "I'll be fine," Evelyn said, though her heart was in turmoil. "I need to finish work today and talk to Hannah." When she arrived home, she was surprised to find Hannah had returned early from school. Her daughter, who would normally be doing homework in the living room, was staring absently out the window. "Hannah, why are you home early?" Hannah turned around, her eyes moist with tears. "Dad called me about the custody case." Evelyn sat down next to her daughter and tried to embrace her. As she did, Hannah's sleeve rolled up, revealing old scars on her arm. "What's this?" Evelyn asked worriedly. "I just fell off my bike before." Hannah quickly pulled down her sleeve and changed the subject. "Mom, I don't want to be separated from you." At her daughter's words, tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. "Don't worry, Hannah. I promise I'll fight to keep us together." She hugged her daughter, but anxiety swirled within her. Hannah's scars and her unnatural explanation. An intuition that something important was being hidden tightened Evelyn's chest. The next day, Evelyn visited attorney Lisa Jones's office. "The situation is difficult," Lisa said frankly. "Jeffrey is an influential man in town, and many people support him. And that emotional outburst of yours during the divorce was recorded, labeling you as unstable." "But I was just trying to protect Hannah," Evelyn explained desperately. "We need to take a different approach this time," Lisa said quietly. "Avoid making claims without evidence and respond calmly. Jeffrey expects you to get emotional. Don't play into his hands." Evelyn nodded, but her heart was heavy. The image of the scars on her daughter's arm was seared into her mind. It was clear that Hannah was hiding something. But what she needed now was calm. Whatever the truth might be, to reveal it, she needed to be a strong, rational mother, not an emotional mother. On her way home, Evelyn looked up at the sky. Dark clouds were beginning to cover the town. It was clear that this trial would be a challenge for her and Hannah. But she was determined never to give up. As the court date was set, tension began to permeate Evelyn's life. While preparing dinner in the kitchen, her phone rang. She held her breath when she saw the name displayed on the screen. "Good evening, Carol," Evelyn said her mother-in-law's name. There had been little contact between her and the Lawrence family since the divorce. "Evelyn, I'd like to speak with you." Carol Lawrence's voice was elderly but dignified. "Robert is here with me too." "Go ahead," Evelyn replied, keeping her eyes on the pot. "For Hannah's sake, don't you think you should give up custody without a fight?" Carol suggested indirectly. "If this goes to court, everyone will get hurt. Especially you," the voice of Robert Lawrence, who was supposedly mild-mannered, chimed in. "Our son is a respected figure in town. The court will likely rule in his favor." Evelyn was momentarily speechless. Her in-laws had always been friendly toward her. She was shocked by their sudden cold attitude. And she detected something behind Carol's voice, tension, a tremor like someone hiding something. "You say it's for Hannah's sake, but she wants to live with me," Evelyn responded calmly. "I'll fight for our happiness." After hanging up, Evelyn stood by the window, gazing at the darkening sky. She could sense Hannah doing homework in her room upstairs. It pained her to think of the burden this dispute was placing on her daughter. The following week at a PTA meeting, Evelyn noticed further changes. When she entered the school hallway, other mothers who had been friendly before abruptly stopped their conversation and forced smiles. "Hello, Evelyn," said Sandra Williams, the PTA president who usually welcomed her warmly. Today, however, her eyes didn't meet Evelyn's. "Sorry, I'm in a bit of a hurry." When Evelyn entered the classroom, she noticed people moving away from her. During the meeting, her opinions were ignored, and others averted their gaze when she looked at them. After the meeting, she overheard a conversation between Sandra and Marion in the restroom. "According to Jeffrey, she's mentally unstable and has tendencies toward drug dependency," Marion's voice echoed. "Jeffrey should get custody for Hannah's sake." "Poor child." Sandra's sympathetic voice continued. Evelyn froze. Unfounded rumors. But she had no way to counter Jeffrey's words, who was an influential figure in town. When she returned home, Hannah was reading a book on the living room sofa. "How was school?" Evelyn asked cheerfully. "Normal," Hannah answered briefly and quickly returned to her room. That night, Evelyn was awakened by her daughter's scream. She rushed to Hannah's room and embraced her daughter, who was having a nightmare. "It's okay, Mom's here," she whispered. "I was scared." Hannah murmured. "What were you scared of?" Evelyn gently asked. Hannah momentarily looked as if she was about to say something, but then withdrew. "It's nothing. Just a bad dream." Evelyn wondered if she should press further but restrained herself to avoid putting pressure on her daughter. "If anything's bothering you, you can always talk to me." On the weekend, Hannah was invited to her friend Jessica's birthday party. Evelyn was glad to send her daughter off, hoping it would help take her mind off things. However, 3 hours later, earlier than planned, Hannah opened the front door. Her eyes were red, and she had clearly been crying. "What happened?" Evelyn asked worriedly. Hannah was silent at first, but opened up under Evelyn's gentle gaze. Brenda showed up at the party. Brenda Carter was Jeffrey's new girlfriend. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten at the mere mention of her name. "Did she do something?" "In front of everyone." Hannah's voice trembled. "She said, 'I'll soon be your new mother. And then, I'll teach you the right way to be raised from now on.'" Evelyn felt anger rising but suppressed it. What Hannah needed now was her calmness. "How did that make you feel?" she asked gently. "Embarrassed and scared," Hannah said in a small voice. "But I didn't want to worry you." "Why wouldn't you want to worry me?" Evelyn was confused. "I know how hard you're trying," Hannah said. "And Hannah cut off her words and pulled at her sleeve. Evelyn again sensed her daughter was hiding something. But rather than pushing her, she decided it was more important now to build trust. "Hannah, you don't need to hide anything," she said quietly. "I'm always ready to listen. We can be strong together." Hannah nodded but said nothing more. As the trial approached, Evelyn felt increasingly isolated in town. Even at the library, her colleagues' attitudes were changing. One rainy afternoon, she was sorting returned books. The library was quiet, with only the sound of rain breaking the silence. "Evelyn Lawrence." Turning to an unfamiliar male voice, she saw a middle-aged man standing there. "Yes, that's me," she replied. "Mike Davis," the man introduced himself. "I was a high school classmate of Jeffrey's." Evelyn felt wary. "Can I help you with something?" "I wanted to warn you," Mike lowered his voice, looking around. "Behind Jeffrey's perfect gentleman image, there's another face. Since high school, he's had trouble controlling his anger." Evelyn's heart began to beat faster. "What do you mean?" "Those who defied him." Mike hesitated. "Anyway, you shouldn't trust his calm exterior." "Would you testify in court?" Evelyn asked hopefully. Mike shook his head sadly. "I can't go against the Lawrence family in this town. I have my own family to consider." After he left, Evelyn leaned against the bookshelf. Something was beginning to connect in her mind. Jeffrey's perfect exterior, the scars on Hannah's arm, the nightmares. She didn't notice that Hannah had been listening to this conversation from behind the library bookshelves. The girl's eyes showed determination, as if she had made a decision. But she wasn't ready to confide in her mother yet. Rather than Mom losing credibility by getting emotional, I should be the one to tell the truth at the right moment, she vowed to herself. On the day of the trial, many cars were parked in front of the Pinecrest County Courthouse. Evelyn took deep breaths as she climbed the stone steps with her lawyer, Lisa. The morning sun reflected brightly off the building's windows, as if illuminating her with the light of truth. "Don't be nervous," Lisa said calmly. "Remember to control your emotions and speak based on facts." "I understand," Evelyn nodded. Beside her, Hannah was surprisingly calm. The girl had shown a quiet, determined expression since the previous night. Entering the courtroom, Jeffrey and his legal team were already seated. Jeffrey was dressed in a dark gray suit, wearing a confident smile. His parents sat in the front row, watching Evelyn with dignified expressions. What was even more surprising was that many of the town's prominent figures had gathered in the courtroom. It was as if the entire town had come to witness this family dispute. Evelyn couldn't hide her inner turmoil, but she tried not to show it on her face. "All rise," the clerk's voice echoed as Judge Donna Harrison entered. She was a strict-looking woman in her 60s, known for her sharp observational skills. After opening statements, Jeffrey's lawyer presented the first evidence. The large screen displayed footage of Evelyn crying hysterically during the divorce. "This is the moment when the defendant lost emotional control 2 years ago," the lawyer explained smoothly. "And here is a scene from a school event." The next video showed Evelyn crying during Hannah's school play. Everything was taken out of context and edited to make her appear emotionally unstable. Evelyn felt her hands trembling. She was angered by these underhanded tactics but remembered Lisa's advice and maintained her composure. Glancing at Hannah, she saw her daughter giving her a small nod and mouthing, "It's okay." Jeffrey's lawyer continued by calling a psychologist as a witness, who evaluated Evelyn and Hannah's relationship as overly emotional and dependent. Evelyn's heart ached at this false assessment, but she waited for her chance to refute it. When her turn finally came, Evelyn took the stand and was sworn in. Lisa began questioning her, and she explained her healthy relationship with Hannah, her stable job at the library, and the safe environment she provided. However, when cross-examination began, she nearly felt overwhelmed by the aggressive questions from Jeffrey's lawyer. Ms. Lawrence, have you ever been dependent on prescription medication? No, I have not, Evelyn answered truthfully. Then why did you receive therapy after your divorce? To process the stress of divorce in a healthy manner, she replied calmly. Have you ever asked about the scars on your daughter's arm? The lawyer suddenly changed his question. Evelyn was momentarily surprised but answered calmly. Yes, I was told it was from a bicycle accident. The lawyer gave a cold smile. So you're not aware of the real cause? Shouldn't a good mother pay more attention? Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. Please answer with yes or no, the lawyer said sternly. Lisa objected, and the judge sustained it, but the damage was already done. Whispers spread throughout the courtroom, and sympathetic looks were directed at Evelyn from the jury box. She felt herself being pushed into the emotional mother stereotype. Jeffrey was the next to take the stand. He sat elegantly and gave the judge a confident look. Mr. Lawrence, please explain why you are seeking custody of Hannah, his lawyer asked. I want to provide my daughter with a stable environment, Jeffrey answered in a calm voice. My ex-wife is a good person, but unfortunately, her emotions are too volatile. For Hannah to develop healthily, she needs a calmer, more rational environment. Jeffrey remained unshaken during cross-examination as well. He answered Lisa's sharp questions with composure, seemingly perfect, as if he had rehearsed. After finishing his testimony, Jeffrey turned to the judge and confidently said, A mother who cries this much can't raise a child. My daughter needs someone calm. Someone like me. He smirked down at Evelyn with an expression of assured victory. The courtroom fell silent, and Evelyn was overcome with a sense of despair. But at that moment, Hannah, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up. May I speak, Your Honor? The girl's voice was calm but filled with determination. The judge looked slightly surprised but nodded. Hannah Lawrence, although you haven't been called as a witness yet, as a party to this case, it's important to hear your opinion, Judge Harrison said. Come forward. Hannah quietly stepped forward. She looked at her father for a moment, then gave her mother a faint smile. I want to tell the truth, she said. But since words alone might not be believed. Hannah rolled up her sleeve. Please, look at this. As the courtroom held its breath, multiple bruises and old scars were revealed on Hannah's arm. Some were clearly burn marks. These are from when Dad couldn't stay calm. The judge froze. Murmurs spread throughout the courtroom. The color drained from Jeffrey's face, and he suddenly stood up, shouting, That's a lie. Evelyn was too shocked to speak, seeing the full extent of her daughter's injuries for the first time. Tears fell from her eyes. Why hadn't she noticed? Why couldn't she protect Hannah? Order in the court. The judge banged her gavel. Mr. Lawrence, sit down. Hannah, continue. Hannah began speaking in a trembling voice. However, she didn't become emotional but simply stated the facts. Dad always, when Mom wasn't looking, she continued. And he threatened me, saying if you tell your mother, worse things will happen. Mom became emotional because she was always trying to protect me. She further revealed that her grandparents knew the truth but remained silent, covering everything up to protect the town's reputation. My grandparents turned a blind eye. Because family reputation was important to them. When Hannah finished her testimony, the courtroom was enveloped in complete silence. Jeffrey tried to rebut, but was left speechless in the face of his daughter's quiet testimony. Carol Lawrence covered her face with her hands and wept silently. Evelyn stood up toward Hannah, overwhelmed by her daughter's courage. At the same time, her heart was filled with guilt and sadness for not having noticed. The trial was temporarily suspended, and it was decided that Hannah would have an interview with Dr. Claire Sanderson, a child welfare specialist, in a separate room. Evelyn was also permitted to attend, and the three entered a small consultation room in the courthouse. When the door closed and they were finally alone, Evelyn asked Hannah in a trembling voice, "Why didn't you tell me before? I could have protected you." Tears welled up in her eyes, mixing feelings of guilt, helplessness, and deep love for her daughter. Hannah took her mother's hand and quietly replied, "I didn't want to worry you. And Dad said, no one would believe you anyway." The girl momentarily stumbled over her words and continued, "Every time you tried to say something, I saw you being called too emotional. I was scared." Evelyn touched her daughter's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "To think you were bearing this burden alone. I've failed as a mother." Hannah shook her head and gripped her mother's hand tightly. "That's not true, Mom. You always tried to protect me. That's why I wanted to protect you this time." Dr. Claire watched this mother-daughter interaction quietly and began gently asking questions at the appropriate moment. Hannah sometimes stumbled over her words but gradually began to recount past events. Evelyn's heart was torn apart by the details of abuse her daughter revealed. "Dad always starts getting angry over seemingly minor things," Hannah quietly explained. "Like being late with homework or having a messy room. At first, he would just scold me, but it gradually escalated and..." She looked at the scars on her arm and said, "This is from when I couldn't win an award for a school project. Dad took the iron and..." Evelyn gasped and instinctively tried to embrace her daughter, but restrained herself at a slight signal from Dr. Claire. It was important for Hannah to speak at her own pace. After the interview and before the trial resumed, Evelyn and Hannah sat quietly in the cafeteria. A new bond had formed between mother and daughter. It was a bond based not on secrets and fear, but on truth and courage. When the trial resumed, Dr. Claire's report was submitted. The doctor evaluated Hannah's mental state and praised her courage in waiting until she was ready to tell the truth. "Hannah Lawrence is an extremely strong young woman," Dr. Claire solemnly stated. "She has kept silent for a long time to protect her family's reputation and her mother. However, her testimony is consistent, and the detailed descriptions indicate a high degree of truthfulness." At this stage, Jeffrey's parents were also asked to take the stand. Carol Lawrence stood up, clutching a handkerchief with trembling hands. Her face was etched with deep guilt. "I knew," Carol admitted tearfully, "that my son, to Hannah." She choked on her words. She admitted to remaining silent to protect the family's reputation and faltered, saying, "I knew my son wasn't perfect, but if we acknowledged that, our standing in this town would." Evelyn quietly stood up and said to her former mother-in-law, "There should be something more important than reputation." At those words, the entire courtroom fell silent. Ultimately, the judge granted Evelyn full custody and allowed Jeffrey only supervised visitation rights. It was also announced that an investigation into domestic violence against Jeffrey would begin. "This court prioritizes the safety and welfare of children," Judge Harrison solemnly declared. "Furthermore, we recognize that expressing emotions is not weakness but sometimes the strongest form of courage." Evelyn Lawrence fought to protect her daughter, and Hannah Lawrence had the courage to speak the truth. This courage is true strength. As they left the courtroom, the attitude of the townspeople had completely changed. People who had previously avoided Evelyn approached her, offering apologies and support. Sandra Williams held Evelyn's hand with tears in her eyes, saying, "I'm sorry for doubting you." Mike Davis also approached and told Hannah he was proud of her courageous testimony, offering to testify if needed in the future. "I regret being silent until now," Mike said quietly. "Hannah's courage has given me courage too." Back at home, Evelyn and Hannah sat side by side on the living room sofa. For a while, they sat in silence, but it wasn't a heavy silence, it was the silence of a new beginning. "Hannah," Evelyn took her daughter's hand. "I'm sorry I didn't notice. I didn't see your suffering." Hannah smiled gently. "It's not your fault, Mom. Dad hid it perfectly, and I hid it too. The girl looked straight into her mother's eyes and said, "Mom, you always loved me." That was enough. Evelyn embraced her daughter and promised, "From now on, let's be honest with each other, no matter what happens." Hannah nodded and replied, "No more secrets." That night, they cooked dinner together for the first time in a long while. Laughter echoed in the kitchen, and even if it was small and sometimes trembling laughter, it was the beginning of healing. However, they both understood that the healing process ahead would be long and difficult. Physical wounds may heal, but it takes time to heal emotional wounds. As Evelyn gently stroked the scars on her daughter's arm, she quietly said, "From now on, let's heal together." Outside the window, dusk was falling on the town of Pinecrest. Tomorrow would be a new day. The beginning of a new day walking with truth. For Evelyn and Hannah, it wasn't the end of fear, but the beginning of healing and rebirth. The townspeople were made to reflect on the truth hidden behind seemingly perfect appearances. And many quietly contemplated their own homes, their own secrets. Truth sometimes brings pain, but it is also the first step towards healing. Such a lesson was quietly spreading throughout this small town. 6 months later, spring had come to the town of Pinecrest. The trees were covered in fresh green leaves, and colorful flowers had begun to bloom in Evelyn's small garden. Nature's rebirth seemed to mirror the rebirth in Evelyn and Hannah's hearts. Evelyn had started a reading group at the library with the theme, Emotional Wounds and Healing. What began with just a few participants now filled the small conference room. She herself was attending therapy with her daughter, gradually confronting past wounds. "I can't forgive myself for not noticing my daughter's suffering," Evelyn confided to her therapist, Margaret. "You were a victim too," Margaret replied gently. "Abusers are skillful at hiding the truth. Instead of blaming yourself, focus on how to move forward." Hannah was slowly regaining her smile at school. She was beginning to show talent in creative activities, and poetry writing had become an important means of expressing her emotions. One day, the doorbell rang. When Evelyn opened it, Carol Lawrence was standing there. Her face seemed to bear additional weight of years. "May I speak with you?" Carol asked in a small voice. Evelyn hesitated for a moment but was determined to respect Hannah's opinion. "I'll ask Hannah." Hannah agreed to meet her grandmother, and the three sat on the living room sofa. "We've endured my husband's violence for years," Carol confessed tearfully. "Robert's father was the same. I couldn't stop my son from walking the same path." As the chain of abuse spanning generations was revealed, Carol tried to take Hannah's hand, but the girl wasn't ready to allow that yet. However, she could listen to her grandmother's words. That too was part of healing. As summer passed and autumn deepened, Jeffrey suddenly left town. Rumors spread through the town that his real estate company had gone bankrupt, and he himself had been arrested for drunk driving in another state. The Lawrence family's perfect facade had completely crumbled. Robert and Carol Lawrence remained in town and began donating to the local domestic violence prevention program. Robert particularly supported anger management programs for men, and Carol began giving lectures to other grandparents about the courage to protect grandchildren. A year later, Evelyn and Hannah hosted a special event at the library with the theme, Family Healing. There, Evelyn spoke about her experiences in public for the first time, and Hannah recited her poetry. "Scars don't disappear, but we can draw new stories over them." Hannah's poem moved the audience to silence. Evelyn's final words resonated deeply. True family isn't about perfect appearances, but about remaining honest with each other through difficulties, not hiding wounds but healing together. Silence sometimes becomes the most dangerous accomplice. But if we have the courage to speak the truth and the courage to accept that truth, we can all find a path to healing. Expressing emotions is not weakness but sometimes the strongest form of courage. Hannah held Evelyn's hand, and they smiled at each other. There were tears in their eyes, but they were no longer tears of sadness or fear, but tears of hope for the trials they had overcome together and the healing journey that would continue.